people don't understand that they were conned until after the con is up. You don't know or assume to do that. I mean, it can be a card game that you walk into, and then you go, oh my God, this guy was cheating. Or like, well, you don't cheat. So why would you assume people are cheating?
If you have a trusting nature and you're generally a good person, we're not trained to walk around assuming the worst of everybody and being skeptical and running everything through the filter of maybe this person's a sociopath. We're not running that through our filter. And the other thing that happens is there's the element of like these lies are so crazy and fucked up that it's almost easier to believe that they're true than that somebody's so bizarrely crazy that they would tell them. Nobody could possibly be that horrifically cruel, so that must not be what's happening. It must be what they're actually telling me, which is some cuckoo bullshit story. But it gets psychologically, you get in a position where more and more you so desperately want to believe the cuckoo story because that's the only way out.
Sarma, I'm not even going to say your last name. I'm just going to call you. I think from now on, you are like Oprah and you're just Sarma. I'm going to anoint you.
It would make my life easier. Yeah. I mean, it's not an easy last name.
It's Latvian?
Yes. So if you're Latvian, it kind of rolls off the tongue. If you're not, it's kind of hard to say, and people
Melngailis.
don't get it right.
Melngailis.
Yeah.
Melngailis.
Sarma.
Melngailis. Close enough.
Melngailis.
It's fine. Sarma.
Sarma, this is like probably the most long-awaited interview that we've had. I mean, we've only been going for a year, as you know, but we've been talking about having you as a guest since we started. I'm pretty sure, right? Like, when did you reach out to us? Was it after the vow? Yeah,
I think that we were put in touch definitely before you did the podcast, because I remember seeing your sort of initial artwork and whatnot. And so I mean, your podcast, when it drops Monday mornings, I'm, brushing my teeth and listening to your podcast. And it's been a big part of my therapy.
How are you doing right now? How are you feeling? You're in a hotel room in New York. You're not home. You've got some green juice from the road. What's happening?
I am. I'm a little cagey about my whereabouts in general and where I live and where I'm, for a variety of reasons. But so I'm always a little cagey about where I live or where I am.
We went through that.
But exactly. Yeah. Because the guy is still out and about. And
wait, he's not in jail?
He was out before I went in. He was released from jail before I went in. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, let's set it up.
Yeah, we can circle back when we get to the ass chatting, because no, he was released before I even went in to do my time. So that was a little challenging.
Just to let people know where we're at in the timeline, we're recording before the Netflix series Bad Vegan drops. So we wanted to connect with you before it comes out and see how you are, and to get your story in your words, long form, because we don't know how it's going to be edited, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe we can connect after it's out and ask the questions that come up when we watch it, right?
Yeah, because I haven't seen it at this point either. So right. It's definitely a really nerve-wracking time. I haven't seen it either. So, I gave interviews. I don't know how it's going to be presented, but my goal with it was, I said all along that I just wanted, as long as it was done honestly and in a way that was useful, that's my goal with it.
And how did you feel just watching the trailer?
I think immediately I've sort of developed the skill of going numb very quickly to things. Mm-hmm. But it was a bit jarring, but I kind of feel like I was expecting it to be. So that's,
mm-hmm.
It is what it is. I know they're trying to kind of, they put a lot of the sort of more salacious bits in it. And
it's almost like they have to get listeners. So, I mean, to your point, my expectations of storytelling right now, just through what we've been through, are it's going to be that way. My character is probably going to take a hit just in the trailer. Do you know what I mean? And I think savvy audiences know that, and if they don't, they give them time.
I mean, it's like that with tabloids. It's like, savvy audiences usually know that, the majority of that is spin or not correct or whatnot. But then a lot of people kind of take it at face value and take it for what it is. And then that's just the way it goes.
And the people that know and love you are somewhat undeterred by that, I find. So,
yeah, usually, hopefully.
Usually, well,
that's part of what, I mean, going through something like this, you guys understand it in a way that most people don't. And so one of the things that happens is, even though my situation was a one-on-one situation, there's sort of this automatic closeness that I feel to you guys. Or I think you mentioned you might interview Hoyt Richards, like amazing guy. I've chatted with him, and it was sort of like you have this immediate connection, as if you went through something together, even though you went through separate things, but they were the same sort of thing that most other people don't understand. So you sort of have this immediate kind of bond. And that's, that's been really comforting.
Well, I would call it a wisdom.
Yeah.
People like go trauma bonding and everything. It's a wisdom if you transcend the abuse, you understand what happened, and you turn your experience into wisdom, and then you can articulate it for other people, which is why podcasts, in my opinion, have become so valuable for situations like this, because even your story in Netflix, it's being curated and filtered through someone else who has an impression of you, good and bad. Like, I kind of feel like, we got positive monikers that felt fraudulent to me, in as much as we got some character assassinations that were disproportionate. So, long form interviews to me allow the audience to go, how authentic is this person? How are they when they're asked a hard question? Do they, as long as a platform is used like that, I think, people can make, I think, more informed decisions and take the wisdom from your story.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I hope so.
Anyhow.
And the other thing, I mean, another thing about my particular story is that it's just incredibly confusing, and it's just a confusing story. And then I had my large gaps in memory, and then I had bits and pieces that I've pulled together. And I was really, really lucky to be able to find as much correspondence and material that I was able to find. And going through that, I was able to sort of jog my memory about things that happened. But as you know, when people ask, sometimes people ask questions, well, why did you do this? Or why didn't you do that? Or what happened here? And then I'll find myself thinking, oh, I don't remember. I mean, and so I think that's another thing that I'm sure you guys understand, but that's sort of a hard part of, I find the stories are confusing, that I hope, I just hope the documentary is done in a way that's useful and helpful for people. And in all likelihood, maybe some things will be missed or kind of not quite correct, but not necessarily their fault at all. It's just, I even am confused in trying to articulate my story in kind of the very long form of writing it. So it's sort of inevitable that there's going to be perhaps some, some things that might not be quite right. And I think the thing about my experience too is I feel like I'm always going to have unanswered questions.
That's inevitable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm never going to know exactly. There's sort of a tendency to want to know, why did he do this? What was he thinking? What was his goal? And, but I realized pretty quickly that's just sort of a wasteful exercise, because A, I'm never really going to know, and B, it doesn't really matter, because one thing I know is that I know he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
So, and I just know that his psychology is so wildly different from the one that we share and that most of us share, that trying to kind of you can't put yourself in their shoes and try to understand what they were thinking or how could he have done this to me. It's sort of a wasted exercise.
Well, one of the things our audience has been asking for, and we've been trying to find the right story for it, and we'll probably do more, but really it's the story of the cult of one. The one, one person being, manipulated, gaslit, abused. And this is one of the things that was just so bizarre and full circle for us, as you know, when we first connected. Did somebody connect us, or did you? I can't remember how we connected.
Steve Hassan, I think, sent us did an email intro. Yeah,
that's who it was. Oh, bless you, in a not religious, culty way, Stephen Hassan.
Yes,
for connecting us, and he's done some wonderful great connections for us. We're very, very grateful for. But I will say again to you, and this is why it was so heartbreaking to read the rough draft of your book, which is fantastic, and you need to get that made, and we'll talk about that later. That you ran and you created this masterpiece of a restaurant called Pure Food and Wine. And for our listeners, if they don't know, it was just this magical, sexy, raw, vegan oasis in New York that it's just so full circle for us, because I would be going to New York to be going to Albany to take trainings, and I'd always stop through Manhattan specifically so I could go to your restaurant.
But also, Sarah, you forget one detail. Yeah. Our center was 3 blocks from her.
Oh, yeah.
It was?
Yes. The ESP, the Nexian Center, from 2008 to 2011 was on 13th and Broadway. I'd go over to One Lucky Duck, grab some cashews. I'd go over there once a week, maybe. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. And then every time Sarah came to town, we'd go in there and eat.
I had to drag Nippy there at first because he wanted some meat.
That always happens.
True.
That always happens.
I know. I read that part where you like people who convert.
Yeah, no, that happens a lot. People come in reluctantly, and then they're like, "Oh, yeah."
And I'd always complain.
I was slapping food out of your hand.
No, he'd be like, "This lasagna is mine. Stay off my raw lasagna."
Desserts.
And the drinks and the when you describe the book when you describe the restaurant in your book, all these memories came back because it was sort of fuzzy. It's been a long time since I've been there. And when you describe the wood and the napkins and the organic wine list and the, sake cocktails and this was like, I would go, I get excited just thinking about this restaurant. And that's not even mine. So
yeah, it really was. It was an incredibly special place full of really, really special people, some of whom were in the documentary. But it was, it was a family there. We had a family, and it was a really, really special place. And I was so committed to it, almost like it was my child that I would defend and protect at all costs. And so, this strange nightmare happening where it ends up being destroyed and then appears to be having been destroyed by my own hand is sort of like the most backwards, twisted, like absolute horrific, nightmarish scenario, because all I ever wanted to do was to protect that place so that it would last, forever, or especially the brand. It was I wanted it to outlast me. I wanted it to be a thing that would go on and go out in the world. And, there were 2 parts to it. There's the restaurant, Pure Food and Wine, which was, as you know, that was sort of like the fine dining experience. And then there's the One Lucky brand that had a much farther reach because people could order the products online, and the juice bar, and you could, put maybe more juice bars out and about. We had a couple of locations. That was the more expandable part of the business. And I wanted the One Lucky brand meant so much to me because it had a way of appealing to, it obviously wasn't a sort of kid-oriented brand, the logo is very angular and whatnot, but yet there was a cuteness factor to it that it was so heartwarming when people would send me pictures of, their kids eating the cookies or, and saying that whatever, that they have a condition or eating this, now they can have these sweets that are actually good for them and it doesn't trigger this condition or that. And all of that was just so heartwarming. So I kind of wanted it to be a brand that took healthy, in this case, plant-based eating and sort of made it more mainstream in a not sort of crunchy, granola, fringy way, kind of made it fun and sort of cool and
you did.
and accessible. So
totally
yeah,
did.
so for that to be like crushed and gone is like my worst nightmare. And then layer on top of that I'm somehow blamed for it all, as if that's, like, how would I have wanted that?
Clearly,
How would I have wanted that to happen? And then, I'll also just say that, I mean, this is a whole nother separate conversation, but, I was in a position where I pled guilty to things, and I'll just say that, it happens all the time that people plead guilty to things, in order to just have it be done and over with, as opposed to, enduring some, months or years long trial and with, costing a bajillion dollars that isn't available. So yeah, and then it's been a interesting experience, having that be part of the story too, that kind of not only did all this stuff happen, but then it appears that I somehow meant for it to happen or did these things and therefore it happened. And so I'm hoping that the documentary conveys things, at least relatively accurately. And then I hope that when I'm able to get my story out in long form, that it'll help make it even more clear what really happened. And I hope that it'll help other people see that this can happen. So, in some sort of other experiences, people might not be as quick to make assumptions and maybe see if there was something else really going on.
Great. Well, I think the book, from what we've read so far, certainly will fill in many gaps. And one of the things that really stood out for me, again, having been a fan of your restaurants and your brand and everything, is just how committed and how much of it was clearly your life. And I wanted to show you this. This is my keychain.
Oh,
can you see it?
That's very cute.
It's a silver duck. And for those who don't know, Sarma has a duck tattooed, the logo for her brand tattooed on her arm. And I feel like that means something that people need to know. Like, I believe you in that. Like, obviously you did not want this to happen to your baby. And let's figure out, let's use this podcast to explain how it happened so that people don't have.
I know. I did have, I had the logo tattooed on my arm very early because I did, I branded myself with the brand. And I feel like I just said a triggering term. Sorry for you, okay. But in a different way, because I was so committed to it. And I don't know if this comes out anywhere else, but that year after I disappeared, he tried to convince me to kind of get another tattoo to cover it up or somehow get it removed. And I was like, no. I mean, I thank God I didn't somehow let him convince me to do that, because that would have just been miserable. But I'm glad I still have my tattoo intact, because I still feel the same way about it as I did.
And you did wear a Band-Aid over it for while you were with him, right?
After we disappeared, because he didn't want me to be recognized, and in my whatever strange state that I was in, I sort of had an awareness that, I was afraid of, I didn't use my real name. I didn't, tell people who I was. So it was just kind of easier to keep it covered, because the part of what my tattoo did in regular pre-Mr. Fox life was I'd be out and about and people would ask me about it all the time, which was kind of a marketing thing, especially if I was carrying a One Lucky Duck tote bag on my shoulder at the same time. People would notice that the tattoo matched my tote bag, and then they would ask me about it, and then I'd get to explain my brand, and then, they'd go look it up, and it was marketing. So, of course, once when the shit hit the fan, I didn't want to get asked about it because what would I say? How would I explain it? I didn't want to get asked about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know we're jumping in the timeline, so let's just circle back to we call it, the good years. when in the heyday of Pure Food and Wine and One Lucky Duck around the corner and Sarah Nippier coming in to do Nexium.
Oh, that was the heyday.
ESP recruitment parties. And I have such a vivid memory of being there. I don't remember who it was, but it was some high profile yoga teacher. And we were having like a 10-person dinner with some like other raw foodies and some friends of mine who now live in Sedona. And like, I'm almost positive you were there. Like, I really feel like we met at least once.
Oh, I remember
like the
that.
owner's here. Yeah. Do you remember that party? And we were like, I think we were trying to recruit them into Nexium, and they were probably trying to recruit us into their yoga, whatever they were doing.
Battle of the cults.
Battle of the cults.
In your restaurant.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like it was the, celebrity spotting, beautiful restaurant. Anyway, so cut to, years later when I come back and it's not there, and I found out it's closed, and all I know is tax evasion. That's the only thing that I hear about you. And I didn't even find out the full story. We're still finding out the full story. So let's just, if you can, and whatever you want to share, I know a lot of it's going to be in Netflix, but we would really, the purpose of our podcast is to give people, the red flags so that they can see them and avoid them in their lives, and also heal if they've gone through something similar. So as best as you can, because I know it's how many years from start to finish, like 6 years? 7 years from when he came into your life to when he left? Well, he's still lingering.
He came, it was like the very end of 2010, beginning of 2011, when he came into my life. And then there was this period of time where I kind of pushed him out a bunch of times, and I thought, like, all right, well, this is weird, and I don't want to see him again. And then he would find his way back in. And so that sort of took a while, and then it really sort of ramped up in 2012. But I think, the story of how it started really, there's so many parallels to what people get pulled into cults, because, I had gone through what I describe as my first time being heartbroken, because I just never. So I had broken up with a boyfriend who was a really, really, really good guy, and it was a relationship that I knew wasn't going to last forever because he was 13 years younger than me, but it was an amazing, drama-free, just pure, lovely relationship. And so when that did end, I was super heartbroken and was having a hard time getting over that, and was also overwhelmed with the business. And rewinding a little bit further, there's sort of a whole other story of, the origins of the business. I originally had a partner. We opened it together. There was some drama there. I ended up in a situation where I was carrying a lot of debt. So already I'm kind of in a compromised, vulnerable position on various fronts. Right. So being sort of financially
and
just, being carrying debts and, running this business on my own, which was doing really well, and went through, there was the downturn in 2008 where so many restaurants in the city closed, and we weathered that and got through it. And it was just a lot of work with the restaurant. And I sort of, most of the time, aside from all of the amazing people that worked there, I felt very alone running it on my own. And I always longed for the perfect, ideal partner, and felt like a lot of the wrong people were coming at me. And that just made things more stressful. And so layer onto that being heartbroken, and there were just a lot of things going on at the same time that made me particularly weak in the face of somebody knowing what they're doing and coming at me in a manipulative way and saying exactly what they intuit that I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And then, sort of directly and indirectly saying, implying, making me believe that, they can deliver me this or they can bring me relief. And I think that it just, from all the stories I've heard and things that I've read with people when they get pulled into cults, it's sometimes their weaknesses are being preyed on. But then, and I don't mean weaknesses, I just mean that if you're going through a hard time, vulnerabilities is what I mean. Yeah. And combined with people who have a tendency to be idealistic and want to do good things. And so I had kind of all of those things going on at the same time. So here's somebody coming to me and over time sort of making me think that, he could, that sort of some one way or another via him, I'd be sort of liberated from these things that were holding me back, and that I would be able to grow the business the way that I want to. And I'd be able to do the things that I want to and not be alone with it. And so, yeah, he was preying on kind of both idealism and vulnerability at the same time.
100%.
And it starts like, with cults as well. I think everybody says this. He didn't come at me and with these crazy stories and say, I can make your dog live forever and blah, 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 blah. Because that's sort of that's a part of the story that the press likes to glom onto is that, about my dog. But it's not like he came at me with all of these crazy promises and stories from the start. And I think as people have described, it sort of ramps up slowly and slowly and slowly, and then you're kind of, by the time you realize things are a bit wonky, you're in too deep.
It's indoctrination in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ben. I was just going to say also, just real quick, just that first encounter with him, it also started because you noticed that he was exchanging with Alec Baldwin on Twitter. So there's this, he's already elevated to a position of trustworthy from whatever that means, that he's pals with Alec, right?
Yeah, I think there's like a Wall Street term for that, where investors will fraudulently kind of give themselves validity by associating themselves with somebody who has validity. And I forget what it is, but he did that. And I think it's certainly a red flag, or at least something to be very, 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 very careful with, is meeting anybody in any kind of an online context where you're not, you're vulnerable meeting somebody face to face on another level. But what he did really well is, it started with these exchanges on Twitter where I had been friends with Alec, and Alec was sort of new to Twitter. And I noticed he was sort of bantering back and forth with this guy on Twitter. And I sort of somehow in my brain just thought that like they were actually friends, or it just gave him some sort of validity and so he and I started chatting back and forth, and then it just sort of developed from there. So it was, I think people are used to nowadays, you kind of meet somebody online and you chat and you become friends, but obviously it can go horrifically awry, and it can also be dangerous. And then another thing that people should be careful with is, for better or worse, I've always been very open. So on my website, I had all these blog posts that were very personal. In interviews, I was very open and personal. Even right now, I'm being open and personal, but hopefully I know now not to let somebody use that against me. But so I have a tendency to be too open and to say too much. And so here's this guy, and he's sort of ramping up being interested in me and asking me what's going on, and probably also having read my whatever was I had written publicly or things I'd said in interviews. So he already had an understanding of my weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And then I would also just easily be too open with people about things. And so that process begins where he starts collecting almost, useful data for him to then later weaponize. And I think that, like that process where you're asked even, where you're asked or forced to give up collateral. He did the same sort of a thing, just a little bit more indirectly and slowly and over time.
And gaslighting you, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a big
he
way.
collected dirt on you in a covert way versus, give me a naked photo. He had your vulnerable, emotional, metaphorical photos.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And then he did take, I later found out, I wasn't surprised, but he did take a bunch of videos of me when I wasn't aware that he was, obviously I wasn't aware. They're I think some of them ended up in the documentary, but I have a few of them. And what's interesting is I was kind of if you said to me, "Oh yeah, he recorded videos of you," I'd of course you'd be horrified, thinking, "Good Lord, what did he record?" But he recorded me as if he was trying to gather evidence that I was insane or emotionally unstable, because all the recordings are of me crying, sometimes on the floor. I can't even say words. And he's recording me as if he was gathering evidence of my being unstable and cuckoo. But I look at it and it's like, well, okay, clearly I wasn't. This is evidence that flies in the face of the narrative that he and I are running off gambling and buying Rolexes and having a grand old time.
Well, it's evidence of his cruelty as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. And what's really kind of grotesque is his voice in those audio clips. I mean, you can hear he's holding the phone, so you can hear his voice talking to me as if I'm a child, and he's like, "Come on," he's like trying to calm me down and
he's very
convince me
patronizing.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, they're kind of grotesque, but it's just interesting that he took all those videos, and in the end, they work in my favor because, yeah, they show kind of how fucked up it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're around somebody like that, you're getting gaslit, you're going to, if you express yourself and you're caught in that trap, you're going to look crazy. You're going to look emotionally unstable. That's the thing.
Well, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, I've been in that situation before where somebody's provoking you, and then you snap and you get angry, and then they're like, aha, you're crazy. It wasn't even that, which that's a thing that happens all the time is, that's like a tactic of people like this, where they'll provoke you to explode and get angry. And then they point to that as evidence that you're the crazy one.
Mm-hmm.
But this is more,
it's more calculated.
Like, I look like I'm on drugs. It's like I can't speak. I'm crying, and he's talking to me like a child and kind of being like, get up, get dressed, and I sort of look like I'm barely functional. And
well, the distinction I'm hearing is like if someone's just trying to get your goat and make you crazy, it's less sociopathic, narcissistic behavior as opposed to I'm going to create a series of steps strategically with the end game of you agreeing to my assessment of your craziness and me confusing your world. And you actually describe it pretty well in a paragraph in what I've read so far about how you would leave a situation with your brain a little bit scrambled and stuff like that. You're describing, and I don't know if you've done any reading of like Dan Shaw or Janja Lalich and all that, but the 16 traits of a narcissistic sociopath, I mean, those should be taught in schools.
I agree 100%. And I feel like one of the things I would like to come out of, talking about this, and is that there should be a wider conversation and a wider understanding of sociopathic behavior and what to look
Absolutely.
for, because it's so dangerous
Well, I'll tell you
and
what'll happen.
scary.
A lot of CEOs of companies would get outed, and a lot of people in positions of power would get outed pretty
Yep.
quickly if people are armed with the knowledge of what these things look like.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys see it all over the place too. It's like sometimes there's people out in, I mean, there's one very obvious example in the United States where we look at it and go, you know, you hear pundits kind of analyzing the situation, and you go, well, okay, but none of this stuff is surprising when you look at it in the context
sure.
of there being a sociopath. It's all expected.
The pundits don't know what they're looking at.
Right.
So therefore,
and then everybody,
it's emotional for them, and they can't clinically evaluate behaviors objectively so as to inform people, because they have their own reactions to it, and that's what allows the narcissist to win, because you end up reacting to it.
It's like it's. I always think it's like as if we had no understanding of as if the public didn't really understand what blindness was, and you were somehow trying to analyze. This is a weird example, but like you were trying to analyze Stevie Wonder's behavior, going like, well, why is he doing that? Why can't? And it's like, because he's blind.
Right.
Like it's just he's blind.
I like that.
That's why. But everybody's going, well, isn't it amazing? You know, scratching their heads. Why? How come he just can't do this? And how come he can't cross the street by himself? That's just amazing. And it's like, because he's blind.
It's a great metaphor.
We're actually going to introduce somebody who's putting together something to teach children. So that's an episode that's coming up. So it's for specifically for parents to teach their kids at a young age what it looks like, how to spot it.
Yeah, and here's another scary thing is that I had read at least 3 books about sociopathy before I ever met Mr. Fox, Anthony Strange's. I was relatively educated on sociopathy before that, so there is something about. I don't know, maybe this is a whole different conversation, but being aware of it is sort of step one. I mean, he also knew that I was aware of it, so he worked around it, but
he moved very slowly. The thing that struck me from your book is that you very clearly laid out, like you said, your emotional state, your breakup, the financial strain, and then just that void, that like loneliness that I think is very normal. And if anyone thinks that they're like never going to feel that, then they're never going to love. So, you know, good luck to you. But there's this void that I really felt so clearly in your book that, you know, you fill with food and you fill with like social media and trying to get the likes. And then here comes this guy who you're talking with online. You have an elevated view of him thanks to Alec, and you, not that we're blaming him, is just how it happened, right? Just to be clear. And then he's giving you the things that are like obviously so directly the opposite of this guy that you were in love with. And I totally get that. I think a lot of women have had that experience where like you get out of a relationship and, you know, the guy only eats Caesar salad and men too. Yeah. Any relationship. Sorry. Any relationship. Yeah. Any relationship where all of a sudden you're like, you're with the opposite and you're like, oh, she eats bocconcini and doesn't like Caesar. Like she's the one, you know what I mean? Like it's just like the opposite. You want the opposite and you want to be kind of like, fuck you to the other person. And this person fills the void and it feels great. And not only that, he was offering you things. And this is where I go back to the, like, I don't know what it's like to be a man. So I'm just talking about for me as a woman in this case, like he's, you know, protective and he's, you know, promising you like the comfort and like to, you know, take the wheel for a minute, you know, and you haven't had anyone take the wheel. And I totally got that.
He's predatorial with his promises.
Yes. But what I'm saying 100%. Is I understood the hook, you know?
Yeah. And the thing about people who are smart sociopaths is because of the way that they're wired and because it's like they're very easily able to look at other people and read them and immediately see what are this person's insecurities, what buttons can I push? And that's why they're so good at manipulation, because they very, very, very quickly can read people, a situation, and know how to manipulate it in their favor.
So you nailed it. I mean, what I've noticed, and I would say that the behaviors that we're talking about, the predatorial behaviors, do mostly come from men. You rarely hear about predatorial women. It's just
Yeah,
not.
they exist.
They
I mean,
exist.
there are a few examples out there, but it is
Yeah,
much more
but
common in men.
it is, and I think from what I've seen is, while Sarma, you're going off in your life trying to build something and do something. That's the world you're studying in. You know, Sarah and I, we want to build something. We want to build something of value, like you said earlier, something that lasts after you're gone. What I see consistently with these types of people is they study how to manipulate people. For whatever reason, it starts early. You know, there's one was the one you just listened to. This kid was going from ages 11 to 17 to take trainings.
Oh, bento box?
And,
Bento box?
The bento box. And so you have to understand, by the time you I know,
Box in the fox.
I Googled him.
I have to like have fun with these things, because it is dark stuff. But you have to understand, these guys, by the time you meet them, they're 15, 20 years in and studying people's manipulations and understanding it. And you're not. And you can't assume, like, for you to project that that's what they're up to means that you do it. And you just don't. It's hard for you to understand. And, you know, we had a great meeting a few months ago with the producer who produced a great film, and she was talking about her story, and it was clear that she had something similar, because you can tell there was no judgment, there was empathy, and she described really, really well to us. It's like, well, it's like any con. People don't understand that they were conned until after the con is up. You don't know or assume to do that. I mean, it can be a card game that you walk into, and then you go, oh my God, this guy was cheating. Or like, well, you don't cheat. So why would you assume people are cheating? Right. So
if you have a trusting nature and you're generally a good person, we're not trained to walk around assuming the worst of everybody and being skeptical and running everything through the filter of maybe this person's a sociopath. We're not running that through our filter. And the other thing that happens is there's the element of like, these lies are so crazy and fucked up that it's almost easier to believe that they're true than that somebody's so bizarrely crazy that they would tell them.
The bigger the lie, the easier it is to digest.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so hard to fathom when it got further into it, and, you know, and he started taking, you know, getting money from me, and it just got more and more painful and horrible. The idea that somebody could be so diabolically cruel was, even then, even though I had an awareness about sociopathy and whatnot, it's like somehow I didn't put, I mean, again, I don't know how anyway, it seemed so, it didn't make sense to me that somebody could possibly be that diabolically cruel. And it's even not like so much a rational intelligence thing. It's just like on an emotional human gut instinct level, you think, well, nobody could possibly be that horrifically cruel. So that must not be what's happening. It must be what they're actually telling me, which is some cuckoo bullshit story. Right. But it gets psychologically, you get in a position where more and more you so desperately want to believe the cuckoo story, because that's the only way out, as opposed to admitting that you've already kind of messed up your, you know, what happened was, when he started getting money from me, and then I started to get more and more compromised, then to say to myself, wait a minute, you know, he must be full of shit. I would have had to acknowledge that I'd already made a colossal mistake. And now, when I was already feeling really down, I've just royally fucked myself, because now I'm in a couple $100,000 of debt. And so you just want to believe what they're saying. You want to go with it. And then, of course, what happens is, you know, multiply that couple $100,000 by 10. And
well, and here's my take on that too, is they know that reconciliation is hard. And I think they double down then. Right.
Of course. Yeah. They know exactly what they're doing.
They feel
that's why
they sense your dichotomy, and they go, in order for this person to make an about face and pivot, they got to do something really, really hard. And they know that's it's such a mind fuck, because they understand that you're going to go have to eat some humble pie and crow to your friends, to your constituents, that you've been probably doubling down on his character and defending for a while. So you have to be wrong. Really, they recognize that it's hard for people to be wrong and make that pivot until.
Did anyone try to, Sarma, in this time, did anyone warn you, or did anyone try to be like, who's this guy? Or was it all happy roses and unicorns?
It was not happy roses, unicorns. I think, one of the things that made me a good target for this is that I tend to be on the introverted side. I tend to kind of keep to myself. So it's not like I had that sort of, I didn't tell anybody about him for a really long time. And so he definitely capitalized on that. That worked in his favor, that, and that I didn't have like this I was very overworked and I had a lot of people around me, but not in a I didn't have like that lifelong best friend who I spoke to every day, who knew everything that was going on in my life, who would have stepped in and gone, wait a minute, who is this guy? What the fuck? And what they do very well is when people did get suspicious of him, they find a way to put up barriers between you and that person.
That was my question.
Try to get that person out of your life. Yeah.
Did he direct you to be secretive about him? Did he strategically slander other people that you were close to? Was he that involved?
I think in probably a lot of subtle and not so subtle ways, he developed that dynamic, which again is very common when in the whole cult thing, which is that us versus them. So this is something that developed over time, but more and more he sort of developed himself into this figure of authority that knows things that most other people don't know, and people out there are sheep, and I chose you because you're smart and you can change the world and you're meant to do all these powerful things, and everybody else, they're all sheep. And so again, it's not like one conversation, it's all these little things. And then I think, on an individual level, when people started to get in the way, maybe he would find a way to, to put up a wall between me and those people.
There are a couple of red flags that stood out to me in your book. Is there anything else that you want to share? Like, for example, the thing that you said about the first time you ever saw his eyes in a photo, or was it in person and you got spooked?
At first it was in a photo, and I got spooked because his eyes in the photo even were really intense to the point where it was scary. And again, this is something to be careful of, is what happens in the face of red flags is you rationalize them away, not really knowingly, you just sort of, you rationalize them away somehow or another. And then one of the things that a lot of these people do in person, and there is a characteristic of the sociopath too, is that stare, the intense, non-blinking stare, which probably, and somebody like Steve Hassan would be better equipped to talk about this in detail, but probably has strange hypnotic effects. Because one of the things that happened is I've recovered a lot of our correspondence, and going through all of it, I was always struck by how much I was pushing back on him, and just pushing back. But then I remember, because he'd be trying to get me to send him more money, right? And I'd be pushing back on him and fuck off, fuck you, and in our correspondence. And then the correspondence would stop because maybe he came over, or I was with him in person for a while. And then you look at the records and it's like, oh, then I sent him a wire for $50,000. Then I sent him a wire for $10,000. Then I sent him a wire for $15,000. And I'm thinking, okay, I was pushing back on him, but then when I was with him in person, whatever he said got me to do what he wanted him to do. But I don't really remember all those conversations. I don't remember all that in-person interaction.
Is hypnotizing you? What do you
And
think
I
he was
wouldn't
doing?
have. I don't know. I just know that he certainly had, his power was incredibly strong in person, and it clearly had to have been a weaker connection and power when we were apart. And
Absolutely.
so that's probably why so much of my sort of chat conversations with him that I have documented, I'm pushing back on him so much of the time.
Just out of curiosity, what was he saying he was using the money for? What was the vision that you thought you were embarking on with him?
Well, this is, so you guys will understand this, because when you ask that question and I answer it and say I don't really know, like I didn't really understand, because nothing was ever, he obviously did the opposite of articulating anything clearly. So I I was always like, he would kind of say, he would say these weird things like the money was being shelved. Well, what does that mean? Are you taking it actually in bundles of cash and putting it on a shelf? Like, what do you mean the money's being shelved? So he would say things to me, and then he said it all. He sort of created this story narrative situation where it's as if the money didn't matter and he was putting me through these tests, and that it was all along it was like just about to be over. So it was like, well, just do it, like just this one more time. Well, you have to just do this one more hard thing and it's all going to be over. And so he would get me to, he would get my brain to rationalize, like, okay, well, if I just do this, then it's all over, and then I get everything back, and then, then I'll be able to, then it will all be okay. And he would always say to me that not only would it all be okay, but like, say, I mean, the really gross, painful part of the story is that he got me to borrow money from people. So what makes this situation painful beyond my own personal pain is that other people were harmed via me. And so I have to kind of carry the guilt and the shame of that. But he would always say, like, oh, all these people are going to be taken care of. So, if I borrowed money from somebody, it was as if they'd get it back tenfold if they wanted. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered, because, it would all be undone, or they'd get it back, or they'd all be money whipped, is what he'd say. Um, and again, I'm not articulating any of this very clearly because it wasn't very clear.
Well, we understand that, and again, like, we're going to refer people to the series and the book when it comes out and fill in those gaps. And hopefully, this episode will be another layer of understanding and education, specifically around this concept of the cult of one, that people can get conned.
Yeah, and I think what's so important for people is to be, I mean, just to be as kind of awake as possible in your life and relationships, and involving new people in your life. But what's so scary is that first hook. So the first time he got me to give him money, and I don't even remember the exact amount. Was it 12,000? Was it 10,000? Was it 6,000? But you know, they find some way to sort of trick you into, like, oh my God, this is emergency. I just need this right now. And it's like, oh my God, you need me to help you? What? Okay, well, I can help you. I'll do that. So whatever that is, that initial hook that they get in, and then of course, he never paid me back. Maybe he paid me back 10%, and then with the promise that the rest was coming, and then it just snowballed from there into this massive boulder of debt.
Do you know what he did? You know what he did with any of the money?
Well, now I assume he gambled it all away. I'm pretty sure he just gambled it all away. And again, oh yeah, I think he just took it, went to the casino, and that's why periodically he would come back with some money, as if to validate that, like, none of it matters. Here's a bunch of money, but then he wouldn't give it to me. He wouldn't pay me back. He'd maybe here and there he would pay me back a little bit. And so, knowing what I know now, yeah, I think he just,
and he had a track record, correct? He was arrested a few times, like 50 times, was it? Did I read that?
I think he has a significant arrest record. I don't know the exact number, but he was arrested for all kinds of things in the past, I believe. Allegedly. I don't
Right.
throwing out all those qualifiers. Allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But wait, but before, sorry, quickly, before we get to finding out more about him. So you have these and again, we're skipping big chunks of the story. And you didn't wake up from this in the way a lot of other people wake up from cults or abusive relationships, because you were literally, he took you off the grid for about a year. Is that right? Before you were
almost, I think it was about 9 months. Yeah. Yes. I mean, the sort of tabloid narrative was that we were fugitives on the lam, whereas he basically just took me away actually screaming, because I do remember screaming in the car, like screaming and crying in the car. And so I was hardly, on the run. But yes, he took me away, and it was about 9 months, and I didn't have the wake up that most people do. It was more like I was forced awake by getting arrested, which it's a very strange situation to feel like this affection and gratitude to the detective and officers who arrested me, because they pulled me out of a bad situation, even though I was getting, and it wasn't so much in that moment, even though I was appreciative that in the moment they were very kind to me, because I had Leon with me. And so I was freaking out that Leon was going to go to a pound, and I was really worried about Leon, and they were very kind in the situation in the moment. But, that's what pulled me out of it. And when I think about, what if that hadn't happened? What if they hadn't gotten to me? How long would this have dragged on? Like, what would have happened otherwise? I don't know. What people ask me that a lot. Like, well, what was his plan? What were you guys doing in Tennessee, which is where we were arrested? I don't know. I have no idea what we were doing there. I have no idea what the plan was. I have no idea, well, did he have money? I have no idea. I don't know. I think at that point he had run out of money, and I was tapped dry in terms of what he could get out of me. But yeah, the getting arrested is what yanked me out of it. And I know that sometimes, I think in other people's cases, I think even Steve Posson in his book writes about having gotten into a horrible car accident.
Yes.
And that's what prompted, that was the thing to kind of get him temporarily out, and then he got fully out. So sometimes it is like
it's an extreme,
a horrible accident, or getting arrested and physically being yanked away from him.
Yeah. It's something extreme, and everything you describe for people that hated us for what we did have subsequently been like, hey, you freed us.
Right.
In a lot of ways. Anyway, Sarah, sorry.
Yeah. Those officers freed you. No, I just wanted to comment on your description of being arrested and being in jail, and it was heartbreaking, and also you had some really. You're very funny. I want you to know, like, your book has some funny moments, and I, of course, like, not as hardcore with my diet as you are, but I was also imagining I could not eat any of that. Like, when you're like, I just need to be hydrated with my lemon water. I'm like, I would be the same. I'd be the same way. I'm like, do you have a banana? And having real food, like, you have a very particular lifestyle. And then I just felt like so awful that we didn't name Nippy for Mr. Fox, Mr. Fuck Nugget Fox, whatever you want to call him, like how he used your credit card to order Domino's, and then you get the rap for being
he didn't even use my credit card. He didn't use my card. He used his card.
And why are you getting shit for ordering Domino's and breaking the vegan diet?
I didn't order it. I didn't know about it. So the way that I found out about the pizza, I didn't even know there was a pizza. I didn't know a pizza had been ordered. I'm in the jail, the holding cell in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And it's a couple days into it, I think. And, the way I'm like, how holding cells are, people are coming in and out. And this woman comes in. So this woman comes in, and somehow she looks at me and she's like, hey, you're that lady from New York. And I'm like, oh, hello, like, how did she know that? And she's like, I saw you on, and she's of course saying this with a thick Tennessee accent. She's like, I saw you on TV. You're that lady that got arrested because of the pizza. And I'm like, what? The pizza? That's how I found out there was a pizza.
Oh,
and then subsequently, when the detective, when they spoke to me while I was in this holding cell for a very long time, many days. And they told me that they were getting calls from press outlets, and there was this kind of big to-do about the pizza. And I was like,
oh my God.
And they said, like, in the grand scheme of things, of course, it's like, who cares about the pizza? But it was, they were like, well, just we told them you weren't eating the pizza. You weren't in the same room as the pizza.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, huh? Okay, what? And what's interesting and just kind of grotesque is the extent to which, even after there were a couple of interviews where those same, officers, detectives are quoted saying she unequivocally had nothing to do with the pizza. It's kind of out there. I didn't know about the pizza. Like, the tabloids don't care.
No.
They'll continue running the headline saying that, like, vegan restaurateur is arrested, busted with a cheesy pizza. Like, it's too good of a story for them to let go of the pizza.
It's really like, Nabi and I were just talking about how the love-hate relationship we have with the media in general, but like, how the salaciousness of the headlines, your story and our story, like, on one hand, we're happy he's being exposed. On the other hand, when your personal trauma becomes clickbait for them to make money, it's like, fuck you.
No, I know.
At least,
and it's
like, it's awful.
And it's even like, if it's clickbait yet it's somehow worthy, like if it was clickbait that was leading to education. And I said this in the process of the documentary, like, if there's something that embarrasses me, but it's embarrassing in a way that's useful for other people, that's okay. I can handle that. I've been humiliated. It's embarrassing. I don't care about being embarrassed if it's useful to the story, if it's going to help people, if it's going to lead to greater understanding. But if it's just this kind of grotesque pile on of, like, people are just giddy over, what they perceived as somebody putting themselves forward to being a vegan, which I didn't even necessarily do. And I didn't have anything to do with the pizza. And I'm such a food snob that I'm like, really? Domino's? Really? If I was going to eat pizza, I would, So it's like, it's clickbaity in this kind of grotesque way that serves no purpose. And that's what's really gross.
Well, and it's unfortunate that there's an appetite for it too. So
yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
well, all of that completely chaps my ass. Specifically regarding the media and what they did. But is there anything in particular that you want to share that no one else knows that chaps your ass? And regarding Mr. Fuck Nugget?
Yeah, Fuck Nugget.
I'm going to work on that one, Sarah. That's a little juvenile.
Okay, yeah, Fuck Nugget's not that original. I don't know. I just, Fuck Nuggety, foxy, fuck face.
So. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because there are so many things that chap my ass. And when you said that, I was thinking that like, how foxes are cute, and there's sometimes foxes on pillows, and like, I can't, anything with foxes, I'm like, get it away from me. I don't want to see it.
Right.
So, foxes are ruined for me. But there are so many kind of smaller things that chap my ass, and I feel like that's the whole chap my ass thing. It is usually like the sort of smaller, irritating things. But I think the biggest thing that kind of genuinely chaps my ass is that everything that happened and everything that he did and he got and everything that's been destroyed, at the end of it, he walks away clean slate. And yet I'm left with an enormous pile of debt that, if I think about it for too long, is crushing. And so it's not like, oh, my life was destroyed, everything I cared about was ruined, and other people were hurt too, but at least I'm starting fresh and I can start. It's like, no, I'm not starting fresh. There's this enormously messy, piles of various varieties of debts and things that not only do I have to deal with one way or the other, but like feel the shame over it. And even if rationally I know, like, well, I didn't intend for any of this to happen in a million years, it doesn't matter. I still feel the shame of it. I still have to carry that. And he doesn't. And he kind of walks away like, okay, he can, clean slate. He can go off and start screwing with other people and getting on with whatever he's doing. I don't even want to imagine. And well, I'm sure it's already underway. And yeah. And so it's like that chaps my ass, I gotta say.
It does for me too. But listen, Sarma, just a thought, like as a friend, is it possible for you to, like, moving forward, clean up the mess, which I understand you need to do for yourself, but like without the shame and the weight? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it possible just to fix without beating yourself up?
I try. Again, it's all of it is so messy that, and you guys know this too. This is another hairy subject I have to deal with. Is there's this perception that, oh, you're in a documentary and it's on Netflix, therefore you must be, rolling in money because of it. And you guys know, like, you know what I mean? Like, do you get paid for doing The Vow?
Nope.
It's a documentary.
Yep.
Exactly.
We're the subjects.
Exactly. And so in my case, and this is something I have to articulate in a more formal way, but a couple of years ago, in the beginning of all of this, so this conversation of the debt, the part that really upset me and really weighed on me the most was by far the smallest amount that I owed, but what was owed to my employees, which wasn't, it was after I disappeared. The restaurant was chugging along for a while and I'm gone and nobody knows where I am. And so there's all these paychecks in the end that never got paid. So they didn't get paid. And then that turned into this judgment. And that amount of money, that's what weighed on me the most, because these are, people who are whatever, line cooks, dishwashers, servers. And so that was paid as a result of my agreeing to do this. But again, I have to kind of articulate that more clearly. But yes, the point is I did not get paid and I'm not rolling in it as a result of this, which is, which is a perception. I'm sure you guys got that too.
Oh yeah. No, people thought because that we were in a series that we made lots of money and,
And we got out. We got out right before things hit the fan, and we knew everything the whole time. Like, come the fuck on.
Yeah, or that we like had a plea deal. But like, let me just articulate. Let me summarize. You did not. Part of agreeing to do the documentary before it even got to Netflix was that the people you owed money to were going to get paid.
The employees.
Yes, the employees.
So,
right.
Yes. Okay. So my former employees, that entire amount was paid, and I think sort of it finally went through from attorney to attorney, bypassing me 2 years ago. And it just like coincidentally went through on the day of New York restaurants being shut down because of the pandemic. So I thought
what
hopefully,
a gift for them.
Yeah, I was like, hopefully in this moment where people are suddenly losing their jobs and nobody knows what's going to happen, at least some, they're going to get word like, oh, by the way, that money that's owed, that's coming through, or that came through.
How did that feel?
Well, I just felt like, it was a relief no matter what, but just the way that it was timed felt like more of a relief, because it would have felt, anyway, it just felt like more of a relief that it sort of hit at a moment when they probably, anybody who really needed it badly needed it more than ever. So
have you had any closure with any of those people personally? Like, have you been able to
talk
to any of your,
Yeah. Even before that, a lot of my a lot of the people that work there reached out, and I've had, and have been extremely supportive, because, I feel like what they went through is probably like watching mom hook up with this horrific, evil stepfather and not understanding how that happened and feeling betrayed. Right. And so they probably felt betrayed that here I was, this dude, that I allowed this dude in, and then everything got destroyed. And so it was kind of my fault. But they all knew. They knew
you.
Right. They know me. Yeah. They knew how much I cared about that restaurant, and it was my entire life. So they knew that, like, they knew something was very wrong, because they knew I wouldn't have done that. So
no, you were the mama bear. You're the mama bear of the whole thing. Like, you were. I saw that in your book and everything. I get it.
Yeah, and the other really, really, really heartwarming thing is that so many people who, were just customers, or had people that read my cookbooks and my blog posts and somehow interacted with me, even so many of those people out there intuitively knew immediately that something went very wrong.
It
Like they
didn't
may
add
have
up.
been like, I have no idea what happened, but oh my God, I'm so sorry for you,
Right.
because obviously you didn't want to torch your own restaurant and what your whole life was devoted to. So that's been
That's
really heartwarming.
encouraging. Yeah.
I bet you
Yeah.
will receive even more of that support once the docu-series comes out, and people will just come out of the woodwork, and
Hopefully all that's captured.
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's been pretty gut-wrenching to not know, to not be able to see it yet.
I have another piece of unsolicited advice as your new friend, is do as
Please.
much writing as you can right now about what's happening right now and what it's like when see if you can pull yourself out. So the regret that I have is when the vow came out, I didn't write. And since your book isn't out yet, you could have a chapter on this part, and the healing and the restorative justice that you're a part of, and what you're doing to fix things is a big part of the story. I just that's not part of mine, and I wish it had been. I wish I'd recorded it, but I was in the clusterfuck of the aftermath of the vow, and I wish I documented it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that it's. I think one of the most important things is that ability, which is something that you really have to practice, and which I've practiced and started to feel like I'm getting better at, which is being able to kind of step back. So a lot of chaotic things might be going on, but like being able to just step back quietly and go, okay, like take a deep breath. What's going on here? Like get some perspective. Am I okay with this? How do I feel about this? Let me think about this for a minute. Let me wrap my brain around this, and being able to step back and have that quiet time. I think that it's kind of like, if you're in a situation and maybe you're at a party or in a situation or something, and somebody like says something really kind of gross or something, and you kind of go, huh. And then like an hour later when you're home brushing your teeth, you're like, oh my God, what an asshole. Like when you've been able to step back and get perspective on something, you go, oh, wait, that's not right. Or this isn't how I want things to be. And so I feel like I'm having to do that all the time now, and just stepping back, and instead of just kind of getting overwhelmed and like taken for this really bumpy ride. And I think that that's part of what can happen to get oneself into the situation in the first place, is that the more chaos there is, the more confusion there is, the harder it is to step back and see what's really happening. So I'm feeling like, what would have served me back then is something I'm trying to be aware of right now, in knowing that things are probably going to get a little more chaotic for me. And I want to, I just want to kind of keep being able to like run and hide for a minute and take a few deep breaths and think about it.
Yes, definitely.
As things
Definitely.
happen.
Like if you don't have to answer. You said, I'm going to think about that. I'll circle back. Add it to a to-do list,
I tell Sarah, she calls social media social meds. Social meds isn't the real world.
Oh yeah. I know. It's
about 5%.
It's a strange.
About 5%, and normally it's people under 30.
It's a very loud 5%. It's like a screaming 5%.
It's a little brat.
Yeah.
Demanding your attention.
Sarma, if people are going to listen to this, we're going to suggest they watch the series first, but if they don't and they're hearing this for the first time, or to anybody, I guess, what do you want to tell people that you really like? What's your main nugget of wisdom that you wish to impart?
Oh, good question. I mean, I think it just somehow has to come around to avoiding stepping into something like this. And part of the way to do that is to, as much as possible, cultivate self-awareness and thoughtfulness about who you're getting involved with, who you're letting into your life, and stepping back and evaluating it and thinking it through. And I know from experience that you might think that you know. Again, I had read books about sociopaths. I've been in terrible situations before with bad people, so you'd think I'd know better. Then it happens again, then it happens again, and it happens again. And I feel like I've been slapped around enough to go, okay, I finally get it now. Like whatever, universe, like I get it now. I'm done with the lessons. And and the best defense is just continuous knowledge and understanding and self-awareness and stepping back and being very cautious about who you let into your life and who you trust. And that's not, again, you don't want it to be this thing where, oh, don't trust anybody. It shouldn't be a negative thing, but just to cultivate enough self-awareness to be very, very cautious, in particular when you're somehow down. Like if you've suffered a defeat or you're going through a breakup, or, kind of having an awareness of potentially being in a vulnerable situation and being extra cautious. I know that's not a very sound bitey nugget of advice, but
I know it is.
But there's a caveat I like to add to that, because there's a lot of people who go, oh, well, that's not me. Right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And
oh, yeah.
I would say this: were I one of those people, a narcissistic sociopath, and someone demonstrated to me that they think they're not susceptible to that kind of stuff,
yep,
I would target you.
Yes,
because that works in my favor.
Exactly. I mean, that comes up a lot because people sometimes have this perception that well, I must have some character flaw, defect, or I'm just kind of stupid in some way, or whatever it is. I mean, that moment in The Vow where I think they were in a coffee shop and somehow they're talking about it with these people in a coffee shop, and somebody in there says oh yeah, well, that would never happen to me. Like the classic line, oh yeah, well, that would never happen to me. And it's just, I felt that gut punch of what that, because I know what that feels like to hear that. And I just, yeah, I mean,
and normally,
watching The Vow was
normally someone who says that has probably had that done to them and didn't even know it in some shape or form.
Exactly. And then one more thing that was one of there were so many valuable things that I learned while, listening to your podcast every Monday morning as soon as they dropped. But one of the interviews you did with Mark Vicente, when he talked about how people kind of don't understand. Okay, people look at somebody like Keith Raniere and his ridiculous knee pads and the volleyball and his goofy ways, and they think, wait a minute, how could people have followed that guy? And I get that as well, right? People are like, what was she doing with that guy? How did that happen? And then they think well, maybe it was some sort of crazy, I was just in love with him, and it's they don't really get it. And then I also didn't quite get it. It's I there was something missing where I was yeah, what the fuck happened? And there's the part when your interview with Mark Vicente where he says that what these people do is, what they're able to do is they find a way to present to you an idealized version of yourself and who you kind of really want to be. And then they sort of create this dynamic where it's as if they're going to bring you there, they're going to deliver it. And that's what you get attached to. And so it's not that that's what you're attached to. And when he said that, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
And the knee pads and all that stuff are part of the con, the unassummingness, I'm a geek. I'm just regular guy. And that's part of it.
Yeah, Keith used to say, I'm not a guru. I'm just a guy. I happen to have a very high IQ, but I'm just a guy.
Right. The part where he talks about sociopathy so openly was chilling, because I had examples of that too, where it's they almost tell you what they're doing in a weird way that nullifies you thinking that they're actually doing that because they just talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarma,
you got the lessons.
Yeah. I was going to say, we have we really could talk for hours. I'm aware that it's an hour and a half already.
Yeah.
is there any, like, so you've been obviously in therapy and talking to these experts and reading these books, and I'm so glad that
I haven't been in therapy.
Oh, wait, I thought you were with Stephen Hassan. No, did I make that up? Or he was just helping?
No, we've been in touch and we've talked a bit, but I have not. This is something people kind of assume that I've gone through all kinds of specialized therapy, and I haven't at all, not at all. And so that's why to me it's so meaningful to have resources like listening to you guys, and that's why I've kind of devoured so many different books and done research, and I get intrigued with all kinds of trying to understanding like what is dissociation and cognitive dissonance and how that happens, and listening to other people's stories and trying to kind of put it all together myself. That's been really helpful.
Limitation, the therapy, getting therapy, because I know it's cheap.
The sort of really the people who understand specifically this type of thing, I would love to sit through therapy, and I would have in the past, but it feels, it's obviously that stuff is very expensive, and I'm sitting in a place of owing a lot of stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
So I don't really feel free to do that, but I feel like I've been lucky that there's other resources out there to kind of help me figuring this stuff out for myself.
Well, I hope that the Netflix series is healing for you in the same way that The Vow was for us, in terms of reaching people, helping people, educating people, and you're going to get messages, I'm sure, of all kinds.
Yeah, I hope so. I have gotten a lot of really kind DMs from usually women, who say, something royally fucked up happened to me too, and I think people are very often don't talk about it because they're embarrassed. Mm-hmm. People very often don't talk about their own situations and being conned or manipulated or whatever's happened because they're, because they're embarrassed. So I hope that, whoever is out there kind of like feeling some shame over falling for somebody, or, maybe it'll help people feel a little less stupid. And one other thing I want to say is, I'm not intentionally giving a shout out to Netflix, but there's The Puppet Master.
Yes.
It was a 3-part documentary that came out a while ago. And I watched it sort of thinking like, oh yeah, I probably should watch this. And I was sort of half watching it, and then got really, was like, oh my God. And it sort of hit me like a truck, because it's just a similar story. And so if, I don't know why I'm bringing it up necessarily, but it's sort of I haven't seen my own documentary, so I don't know, but, to the extent that mine might be distractingly focused on like, celebrities at the restaurant or this, I don't know, but one way or another, I just feel like that The Puppet Master it's an important documentary. That tells a really important story as well.
That and Tinder Swindler have been the people,
I know, I haven't seen,
keep messaging us about right now.
I know. I haven't seen Tinder Swindler yet, but, at some point I'm going to have to watch it, but I'm a little scared because I watched Puppet Master sort of alone unexpectedly and was kind of reeling from it for like a day and a half.
I wish we could be in the same city so you weren't alone during this, because, we know what the ride you're about to go on.
Yep.
And in addition to the ride you've been on, we can relate and empathize, and it's different, obviously, or what you went through was different, but a lot of the tactics are, of course, the same. And thank you, Sarma, for trusting us again, and for also creating a magical experience in your restaurant, which I don't know why I'm crying. Well, I'm crying because it's gone. It's gone, and it was wonderful. And it's a tragedy what he did. And I hope you remember that you created truly a beautiful sanctuary, and you were ahead of your time, and you were, you did something really remarkable and helped a lot of people and did change people's lifestyles.
Thank
really
you. I should have known we wouldn't get through this without crying.
Guys, I tried. I was so close. It was so close.
Sarah
Great
likes
to
to
hear.
wrap
I know.
things up.
We almost made it. I know. I'm a crier too, so I was thinking like, oh, I'm definitely gonna cry at some point. Yeah. I mean, it's like when people send me little notes and they say, "Oh, your book, whatever, your restaurant," like those kinds of comments mean a lot because it's like, okay, well, even though it's gone, at least there's some lasting positive effect. So that
There's some
always
great memories. I
always
cried when I watched the trailer because I was like, that restaurant was so beautiful. It was so seductive and cool and unique. Anyway, I'm gonna stop now. I send you a
Thank
big
you.
hug. I commend you for your
Back at
bravery,
you.
and I can't wait to meet in person and high five and
Yes.
drink
No
green
doubt.
juice and
Raw chocolate,
shoot
Sarah.
some ginger.
In the
chunk some
meantime,
raw chocolate.
I'll be soaking in my CBD oil bath bomb bath.
Yes, I do it every night.
I know. I wish. I try every once in a while, but
It's expensive. Send me your address. I'll send you one. Or your PO box, whatever you feel safe.
Yeah. I've got Leon, so
You're good.
as soon as we get off this, I'm gonna go fetch him and bring him back and cuddle with him for a bit.
Okay, good. Take care of yourself. Go for a long
I
walk,
will.
whatever you need to do. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hugs.
Bye.